Um, Director Balkhi, thank you so much for taking time to chat. I've enjoyed our give and take since I've been in the country. Um, just a little bit about where you are now as a country. Compare it to the first few days in September. How much have you grown as a nation?
Oh, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to always be able to talk to international media and try to send the message of peace and coexistence of the Afghan people out to the world. Since September, from our perspective, we're on a very positive trajectory. We're moving forward in terms of the management of the administrative affairs. It was a mess. It was a mess when we came to power, and we had to streamline a lot of different departments for the expedited healing process of the Afghan nation. So in those terms, from our perspective, we're moving in a very positive direction.
What did it mean to have this transition of governments in a peaceful fashion? There was no bloodshed that many feared. What has that given you the opportunity to do as a very neophyte government?
It was truly an indication and a demonstration by the Afghan nation that they no longer wish to see a war continue to rage in Afghanistan for the interests of a very few specific individuals who have their interests tied to war and war profiteering. And it was a demonstration that it is time. It is time for, after 43 years, for Afghans to come together and live amongst themselves, be at peace with themselves and be at peace with the world, and have an opportunity to live a peaceful life within their own country.
What did you think when you read all the international accounts that said the world is stunned that there was not massive bloodshed as the Taliban government came into power?
Well, that was the predictions by a lot of international organizations, including UN and others. But we, as being the indigenous force that was fighting for our freedom, we always knew that we had the support of the people of Afghanistan. Yes, societies have differences. We never claim that there's uniformity of ideas. It's not uniformity of ideas internationally, nor is there locally. So we understood people have differences, they have fears, they have concerns. But at the end of the day, they knew we were Afghan, innately Afghan, and they did not want to see any further bloodshed in Afghanistan.
To a degree, you're kind of a microcosm of what you thought the concerns were. You were born a refugee, lived a refugee, and now back here in Afghanistan. Firstly, talk about that. And secondly, the fact that the new government has offered amnesty to former government officials. How is that being accepted?
Well, yes, that is true. I was born a refugee during the Soviet invasion, at the end years of the invasion, and I was raised a refugee in different countries in the world, including I've experienced the Western culture as well. I've seen some of the good and some of the bad of those societies. But me, seeing myself as a patriot, someone who loves his country and wants to contribute to its well-being, it was my obligation, my national and my religious obligation to return back to my country and try to build back better than what we had, because we were a laughingstock of the entire world. We always had to be pandered and taken care of by the international community. So that was one aspect. That was my personal drive and impetus to come back and contribute to my country. The second aspect of the general amnesty, it was one of the greatest decisions. I think there's very few instances in the history of humanity where such amnesties have been given to people. I mean, when the United States came, they massacred 4,000 prisoners that had given up fighting in containers. They suffocated them to death, and it's well documented. And we, the Afghans, that associated with the previous government before the United States came, they were given two choices. You either go to prison or you die. There was no third choice. So this was from our perspective, a moral high standing of our people to be able to live and give the opportunity to everyone to live together.
It seems to be finding peace and finding some sense of tranquility has been job number one. But clearly there have been some very significant hurdles that the new government has had to cope with and the fact that so many people in this nation are hungry, facing malnutrition, some facing a huge percentage, facing starvation. How do you cope with that? A lot of the outside world simply blames the Taliban government for this. Is it fair, and how can you deal with this?
The fundamental element for any government to function and bring prosperity to its people is to provide security and establish law and order throughout the country, the territory that it rules. So our number one goal was and will continue to be to provide security, not only for our people to live peacefully, but also for the international aspect of the neighboring regional and world countries to come and see, explore the opportunities that exist for investment and economic cooperation. And that is then related to the economic prosperity of the people, the uplifting of people. Even prior to us coming to power, some predictions by international organizations, over 80% of the Afghan population lived below the poverty line. This was exacerbated, I want to stress that this is not due to mismanagement or incompetency, as some international media like to allege and say they don't know how to manage the
When you talk about
economy.
mismanagement, you're talking about the Taliban government mismanagement.
Yes, the new authorities in power. It is not due to that. I mean, it's one of the greatest achievements from my perspective when 75% of the budget is cut off overnight for a government to be able to enact policies that stabilize the currency. The predictions were that the currency would drop off. The Afghani, the local currency notes, would be worth nothing because 75% of the budget is gone overnight. So it's just one of the indications that this government is competent in the banking sector, and financial sector, and economic sector, and the policies that it is enacting to try to stabilize the situation. But the humanitarian situation was exacerbated. It pre-existed. So when we came to power, it was exacerbated by the automatic sanctions that were leveled against Afghanistan. And these are the types of sanctions that not even Russia faces, not even Iran faces. So we were cut off from the international SWIFT system. We couldn't do any international transactions. Our businessmen, our local people, we weren't able to do remittances. The Afghans living abroad to try to help their family members. And yes, that did contribute to the humanitarian situation that we currently have.
Getting back, I'm sorry I broke your train of thought and my train of thought. There is a large percentage of the world that hopes and is counting on the Afghan government to fail right now. What do you think of that?
I think it's not in the interest of anyone, not in the interest of Afghans who have suffered for 43 years, not in the interest of the neighbors, not in the interest of the region, and not in the interest of the world to have a failed Afghan state. It is not in the interest of anyone, and there is no alternatives to the current government that is in power. The support that it has shown that it has from the people of Afghanistan, and in terms of its open policy of engagement, of dialogue, of trying to bring about a situation that is win-win for all, the policy of neutrality and international affairs. I think this is a golden opportunity, not only for Afghans as Afghans to bring prosperity and security and well-being to our nation, but also for the international community to finally have this burden that has been on its shoulders for 43 years, to let the Afghans function as a normal state and as a normal people that have suffered far too much trauma.
When you hear, especially from the United States, that women are treated horribly here, forced to cover up, not allowed to go dancing, listen to music, not allowed to walk out by themselves, not allowed to be teachers where they want to teach, be physicians where they would like to work as doctors. What is your response?
I think there's a lot of nuance to this. Some of the blanket statements that are out in the media are not true. Yes, we do admit there are some societal constraints within Afghanistan. In terms of the cultural tradition, this is a society that has a 10,000-year history, of which more than 3,000 is written. So they have developed a lot of habits and a lot of traditions that cannot change overnight. And you add to that 43 years of constant conflict, that just shows the level of societal breakdown that has taken place, and the different positions that different ethnicities and different strata of society have taken. Women are allowed to work. They're allowed to work in the private sector. We as the government that supposedly is misogynist, has misogynist policies, we as the government have reopened women chamber of commerces in Kabul, in Herat, in Mazar Sharif that were closed, that didn't function during the previous time of occupation, and they're allowed to teach. Our civil servant force, 94,000 are women in the schooling sector. 4,000 are in the higher education, and they work in the health sector. There's 14,000 women working in the health sector. Yes, again, I want to repeat and stress and emphasize, and I want this message to go across the globe for everyone to understand that our society is different. Just as in the Amazon and in some African states you have women and societies, tribes, they have no clothing. No one has any problems with how they operate. Yet when it comes to Afghanistan, there's this focus on the dress code. But it is innately Afghan at the end of the day. Why am I not allowed to dress the way I want to dress, the way my women want to dress? Why do they have to be a carbon copy of the United States?
You and I have already said we are going to have differing opinions. And I really disagree with what you said, because a lot of women want to dress the way they used to. They want to be able to go have tea with someone they're not married with. They want to listen to music. They want to go to weddings where men and women, although not together, are at the same function. And a lot of the outside world has a really hard time understanding why it is so restrictive.
We, as human beings, as humans, all have the same inclinations that you just outlined. All want to party, all want to interact, all want to enjoy music. But we as Afghans, 99% of the population of Afghanistan are Muslims. We believe in certain values which have restrictions. So for example, when it comes to alcohol, although the human nature is that they enjoy intoxicants in order to reach a state of mind which is high and happy, to drown some of the problems that they have in their life. But Islam says no, that is not a way you drown your problems, not how you address your problems. So alcohol is banned. It's similar when it comes to music. It says music is banned. When it comes to intermixing of men and women, it says it is not allowed. When it comes to sexual relations, it says there's a framework for you, which is marriage. So those are related to our religion. So we view our lives and our society both from a perspective of culture, which we have developed a lot of traditions over thousands of years, and also from the religious beliefs that we have.
What do you think of the women within the nation of Afghanistan who are holding protests and putting demonstrations on social media?
We, as the government, are committed to the freedom of expression and of public gatherings. If they want to demonstrate and raise their voice, the only policy, and this is the policy in the United States and is the policy in the East and the West, if a part of the society wants to demonstrate against a certain policy of the government, they coordinate that demonstration with the authorities. So the authorities can give them the due protection, so they don't run into any, because there's always different mindsets in societies. We do not want to see a riot and people clashing with one another and leading to more bloodshed and physical altercations between two different mindsets that exist within any society. So we as the government have always maintained that you have the right to protest, you have the right to sit-ins, and you have the right to freedom of expression. If you want to demonstrate, please coordinate with the local authorities so that they can provide you with the security that is needed.
Again, I just have a hard time believing those permissions are going to be given. We've all seen video of very conservative Taliban members beating women who are demonstrating. How do you rationalize that?
Again, some of the incidents that have taken place is due to them not coordinating the protests. It's very few women that have certain agendas that do not want to coordinate. They want to see, they want to film a physical altercation with the security forces. And this is not exclusive to Afghanistan. There's videos and documented evidence that this takes place in the United States when the people try to provoke the security and not cooperate when they tell them to do something. This is in human nature. Sometimes security forces engage in acts that they shouldn't, but the circumstances are such that they are forced to engage in physical pushback of those who are trying to provoke. This is not exclusive to Afghanistan, but the incidents that have taken place, the reason behind it, because the demonstrations were never coordinated with the authorities. However, there's many instances where demonstrations have taken place, but no one covers them. They're more support for the government or anti-demonstration that had taken place earlier. No one covers those, but people, everyone likes sensational headlines and material to view.
It's not news if something happens in a peaceful fashion.
Yes. It's not news.
What's wrong with women young girls going to school, going to public school, going on to public colleges, getting an education? Why is that prohibited?
This idea that there's a blanket prohibition or there's a ban is simply not true. The education has actually, even the World Bank had some data out. They said education has actually expanded and is more accessible across Afghanistan. There's more girls going to school now than there were in 2020, before we came to power. And the reason for that is because we, as the government and the policy, is the education is the right of every Afghan citizen, irrespective of their gender. They're going to primary schools, boys and girls. They're going to universities. They're going to private schools. They're going to education centers. There's a suspension, a temporary suspension, and it's not a permanent ban. It has never been called a ban. There's a large percentage of the society that has very strict ideas of what women can do and what they cannot do. And for that reason, the government is trying to take an approach that is gradual, that takes those people that do not understand some of the basic Islamic rights of Afghan citizens or of any human being and their human rights, to try to convince them that it is due to lack of knowledge of that part of society.
And when you talk about that conservative section, it also deals with what we talked about the other day, where women, children are being either sold or transferred.
Yes, absolutely. There's some very ugly practices that exist within the Afghan society. We acknowledge that. We accept that as part of the ugly traditions. We, as the government, have banned the selling of women, of children, of girls, to settle blood feud, to settle debts, or otherwise. And that practice has now been outlawed in Afghanistan.
And what is the punishment?
The punishment is with the courts. I do not deal with the judiciary, so perhaps they would be best able to answer what the punishments are.
What about the United States? Certainly you're upset, the government is upset that the United States has billions of dollars of Afghan money in frozen assets. Firstly, do you think you'll ever get your hands on that money? And secondly, what would it mean to this nation to suddenly have billions of dollars?
Well, firstly, I want to clarify and make sure that everyone knows that this is not my money. It is not my government's money. It's not the money of my ministers or officials that are in power. This is the money of the entire Afghan people, and it is the reserves of the Central Bank of Afghanistan, which allows it to function as a bank. So money is not related to a single individual. This is the collective money that has been saved and put into the reserves of the Afghan Central Bank by the Afghan people. So if I'm in power today, whether I'm not in power today, this is the money of the Afghan people. No one has a right to this money. It has been entrusted to certain countries where it lets our central bank operate. in terms of transactions, in terms of monetary policies that they want to enact. We, as the government, say this is the money of Afghanistan and no one has a right to it. Not the United States, not Germany, not Switzerland, not any other country. And we demand the release of those funds to the central bank without any conditions, because they were not put in there with conditions. There was never any conditions attached to it. So the release also has to be unconditional. And this will then in turn let the Afghan economy function. It will let the common Afghan businessman and trader be able to wire his money. It will let the central bank deal with international bodies to implement projects, to create jobs for the people of Afghanistan. So it would mean a great deal for the Afghan people, for them to have their fundamental right to life, to a functioning economy. It will help them live a much more peaceful and prosperous life.
And what is your hope for the relationship with the United States?
We want good relations, and we term it positive, not good, because good is a very term that can be utilized any way you want. We want positive relations that brings about a situation that is for their benefit and for our benefit, and it secures the mutual interests of us and the United States. And we have this policy towards all. Again, we have a foreign policy of neutrality. We do not deal with the international politics of great powers that takes place. Our policy is economic centric. It is trying to turn Afghanistan into a hub of trade and transit, a region of connectivity that contributes to international peace and international prosperity.
Could you, 2 years ago, could you see a time where you and I would be sitting down and I'd be able to walk around Kabul even at night, go get something to eat without having to keep my head on a swivel?
I saw a time, and I genuinely believed it, that there will come a time, either through the political process that was faltered by the previous people that were here in Kabul, or otherwise, when Afghans regain their sovereignty. We are a very hospitable people. We show a lot of hospitality to our guests. So I did envision this future where foreigners and Americans such as yourself would be welcomed with open arms.
You embrace a free media? Is that accurate? Is that fair?
That is 100% accurate. We have not only announced it as a policy, but we have shown it in practice. I deal with foreign media, so I can give you some figures from my office, which is over 800 foreign journalists have come through my office. We have given extensions to over 100 foreign journalists, visa extensions, to continue to operate in Afghanistan and continue to be welcomed into Afghanistan. That is the foreign media access to Afghanistan, so they can come and cover what they want to cover. In terms of the local media, we had 500 something, around 500 print, radio and television in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. Sadly, half of it is now closed down. Not because of us, but because of the foreign funding that was channeled to those networks.
The embargo.
Yes. So they closed down of their own volition because they couldn't afford to continue their operations. And currently we have 250 domestic or local media, print, TV and radio. So this shows, and I think we are one of the most media-friendly countries in this neighborhood.
I said one final question, but I have more. Do you think that the government and the people, especially those who have been fighting for so long, are going to get tired of answering these questions? Because the next month, you're going to have a crush of international journalists coming here, marking the year anniversary of the new government and the year anniversary of the U.S. Pulling out of Afghanistan.
I don't think our authorities will ever tire of answering questions of local media or of international media or of the people of Afghanistan. We hold ourselves to account, not only for our people, because if we do not hold ourselves accountable to our people, how are we going to move and enter a stage where we have healed, where we have brought security and prosperity to our people? And that only comes with holding ourselves accountable for our actions. And one of the methods of holding yourself accountable is being very open to the media, to give information where it's needed.
But you're also holding the press accountable as well. What happens if they do stories that you deem aren't fact-based or distort?
This is the policy of any country, and this is the policy and the laws and regulations that pre-existed our arrival to power. Any report that is being made, and this is part of the ethics of journalism, it has to be fact-based. You cannot publish stories that create more mistrust, and that instead of trying to build bridges between nations, it destroys bridges. And that is part of the fake news. So fake news is very destructive for all societies and for international peace, security, prosperity, and it's detrimental for everyone. And we, as the current power and current authorities, government of Afghanistan, have enacted the same laws that pre-existed.
Director Balkhi, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
I appreciate the time.
It's a pleasure. Very nice to be here with you.